They say that in life, there is one thing that is guaranteed, and that is death. I'm here to tell you that in the agency game, in the coaching business, and any business that requires recurring revenue from a customer, there is one thing that is absolutely guaranteed, and that is churn. And in the same way you can't avoid death, you can never avoid churn. But once you accept death, it improves your quality of life. Same thing applies. Once you accept churn and you change its meaning and you look at it differently and you look at death differently, if you can look at churn differently, it will change the way you go about growing your business. And in this video, I'm going to help you remove the emotion out of churn, look at it the right way. I'm going to give you access to this incredible sheet that will help you project exactly where you could get to revenue wise by a specific time, whilst factoring in churn. And we're going to have a bit of a play around with it together. And at the end of this video, I'm going to show you how to get access to it. So make sure to stick around to the end. Now, I've recorded this video a couple times and I keep messing up because I try to make it perfect. So I'm just going to kind of speak frankly and excuse the mistakes because I need to get this video recorded so I can get into my day. So let's start at a really high level, okay? Um, for me personally, I used to look at churn and I used to look at it and hate it. Like the idea of not retaining clients used to really suck. I never understood churn properly in the way that you very likely aren't understanding churn properly. I used to see churn as a very negative thing. I used to get really emotional when I would lose a client, and it was mainly because when you're scaling and growing an agency, you can see in your minds, okay, if I charge 2.5 grand a month, all I need is, 4 clients and I'm at 10K, and all I need is 8 clients and I'm at 20 grand. And it sounds really simple, but then when you put it into practice, it's so much more complicated than that, because you get to 5 clients and then you lose two, and then you gain one, then you lose three, and then you gain two. And it's just this, 2 steps forward, 1 step back, 2 steps forward, 4 steps back, and it can be really, really frustrating to grow your business. And the reason that you're not growing is because of churn. I mean, imagine how amazing growing your business would be if you could guarantee that every time you signed on a client, they were going to stay with you forever and they were going to pay you forever. Now, that would be amazing, but that's just not reality. So may as well accept what churn is for what it is, and then start putting certain things in place to counteract it. So let me tell you about how I see churn and how you need to see churn if you want to start to grow and scale. When I think about churn, the way I think about it is I use churn to reduce churn. Okay. It's almost like the only way you can reduce churn is to go through churn. Now, what I mean by this is you see churn as losing clients and losing revenue, whereas I see churn as a way to improve my product and service. Now, those two different perspectives create very, very different actions, which then produce very, very different results. Okay. So, in the same way that someone could look at death as the end of life, right, and for it to be a bad thing, I could look at death and say, death is beautiful, right? Because without death, we wouldn't appreciate the time that we have on this, planet. Death is bad to some person, but for me, death is an opportunity for me to be reminded to live in the moment, to love the people around me, to send the messages to the people I care about and tell them how much I love them and care about them. So these things are objective. Churn is objective. It doesn't care about your emotions and feelings in the same way that death is objective, and they're both inevitable. But how we see them changes our behavior, which changes our actions, which then changes our results. Now, back when I was emotional about churn, what would happen is I would lose a client and I would just get upset about the fact that I lost the client and I lost the revenue, but I wouldn't do anything. I wouldn't do anything to improve. And maybe it was because I didn't think it was my fault. Maybe it was because I did think it was my fault and I didn't know what to do to fix it. But when I broke through finally, was after I had a moment where I was speaking to an agency owner and learning from him, someone who had really broken through to enormous levels. And I said to him, I'm like, man, how do you not lose clients? Like every time I grow, I just keep on, I lose clients and it sets me back. And he's like, wait, what makes you think I don't lose clients? I'm like, what do you mean? Like you're at, I think he was at 200,000 a month. I'm like, you're at 200K a month. Like, obviously you're not losing as many clients as I am. And he's like, mate, I lose clients every single day. Well, I didn't say mate because he was from America. He's like, I lose clients every single month. I'm like, huh, then how are you growing? How do you reach this level? And he's like, okay, well, I just make sure that I bring on more clients than what I lose. And I was like, ah. And then he's like, then I'd look to do everything I possibly can to reduce churn, because it's like I look to fill up the bucket as aggressively as I can, whilst also trying to clog as many leaks as possible so that my bucket gets filled as fast as possible. And I'm like, oh, okay. Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. I can't believe I haven't been thinking about this like that for a while. And the cool thing about growing and scaling an agency, and I have a lot of moments like this when I'm working with some people one on one. In addition to growing my agency, I'll work with a couple people one on one, and I'll say something like this, and there'll be a light bulb moment, and those are my favorite moments because it's like, oh shit, I've been looking at this totally different. Like even when it comes to spending money on ads, if a lot of people starting up or starting haven't spent money on ads look at it as like, oh, I have to spend money and it's an expense. But then you go, no, how much are you willing to buy a customer for? Well, spend that money and just buy as many customers as you want. And a small perspective change like that then takes someone who's never spent money on ads, and next month they're spending 10 grand on ads, and they've acquired enough customers and they've paid back their ad spend and they're profitable. It's usually paradigm shifts that really create growth in your business. And I'm telling you now, changing the way you see churn is going to create the biggest, it will allow you to take the biggest leap forward. So let's kind of circle back, right? So I was speaking to him and he said, look, I just make sure I focus on two things. The first is reducing churn, and the second is a client acquisition. So my growth rates and the amount of clients I'm adding every month exceeds the amount of clients that I'm losing. And if I can do that, then I will guarantee growth. And I'm like, wow, that's interesting. And he's like, and I look at my business through an Excel spreadsheet. I don't get emotional. When I lose a client, it upsets me. I might feel a little bit of emotion. I immediately go into what can I do to fix? Why did they leave? What's the learning lesson here? But then I plugged some numbers into an Excel spreadsheet, and I factored it in. I factored in the fact that I was going to lose a certain amount of clients. Like, oh, okay, I'm getting close to that 15% target, which I set. And then he just expects it and he anticipates it and he doesn't get emotional about it because it's an inevitability. And ever since I started doing that, I became a lot more emotionless, or less emotional. So let's focus on those two things. The first is, how do we reduce churn? By looking at churn differently. And the second is, how do we start to look at churn objectively and put certain processes in place? Like what is actually needed for you to grow in spite of churn? Okay. So we'll start with the first thing. Now, kind of circling back to what I said before, other people will look at churn like yourself. You may look at churn as losing clients, whereas I will look at churn, and other agency owners who really scale look at churn as a way to improve the product, to reduce churn. It's one of those harsh realities you have to accept when you're scaling an agency, and that is the only way to reduce churn is through churn, in the same way that the only way to grow is through stress and pain. It's an inevitability. There is no way you can reduce churn unless you've experienced churn, so that you can actually get the feedback and learning lessons to improve your product and service to then reduce churn the next time round. Like without that feedback, you're not going to ever be able to reduce it. I wish there was a way where you could sit down and completely predict all the different reasons why, a client will churn, and you spend 12 months before you launch your agency and before you go into this specific niche, but it just won't happen. You can take educated guesses, but sometimes things happen. It's like you don't even have the knowledge in your niche. You don't even have you don't have the foundations to predict these things. You literally just have to, bite down, get ready to get punched in the face, and then just move forward. Now, where churn becomes a problem is when you lose a client and you do not make an iteration the next time round. And this is crucial. Every time I've lost a client, I've always made some adjustment. I never lose a client without making an adjustment. So in the last video, I talked about how I lost a couple clients and I realized lead quality was an issue. I recruited and brought a sales rep to call leads that fixed that problem, and then I got rid of lead quality as a churn issue. But then I started having clients complain that they weren't closing deals, right? Like, look, your leads are amazing. I'm not complaining about your service, but man, I can't keep paying you if I'm not closing deals. So then we built out a sales training program, and we do one-on-one coaching with our clients. And then since we did that, close rates went, through the roof, and we solved that as a churn issue. Very, recently we experienced a client that churned despite all of these systems in place, and I was like, man, that sucks. Like, it was after his third month, and he's just like, look, I did not get the ROI that makes sense for me to continue. And I'm like, yeah, that makes sense. Honestly, compared to what you paid us, the ROI is not there, but I don't understand because, we followed every process, every system, everything to the T. And I, had a meeting with him, and I'm like, man, can you tell me exactly what happened in these meetings that you went and attended? And he's like, oh, I didn't attend any. So and so from my team did. And I was like, wait, what? And he's like, yeah. I'm like, wait, hold on a second. You, I was dumbfounded. Like, I could not believe it because when we first were doing the initial training, okay, I knew both of them were in the meeting, but I was sold, and I knew that the business owner I was speaking to was going to close deals, right? Because we make judgments. Like, so if I don't feel like someone has the sales foundations to close deals, we just won't work with them. But the sales guy that he was with, or the person that he wanted to sell, just his personality was a bit quiet, and he hadn't had a lot of experience selling renovations specifically. But I thought they were going to attend appointments together, right? Turns out he just outsourced it completely to him. And I'm like, dude, what? That makes total sense now. That makes total sense. You like that was the what's it called? That was the variable that didn't exist that I hadn't accounted for. And so what we did, by the way, straight away, I booked him some appointments, and he went and attended him themselves, and he closed the deal. Like, his third appointment. It was crazy, right? And he's like, oh my God, I've just wasted 3 months. I've just realized. And I'm like, yeah, well, I'm not surprised. I'm not surprised one bit, but it is what it is. Things happen. He learned a lesson. I learned a lesson. Now, moving forward, in one of our absolute criteria is if we're going to work with someone, unless the sales rep that they have employed has a consistent long history of closing deals that were the type of deals that we provide, not referrals, like cold customers that have come through online, the owner of the business has to attend the appointments themselves, because no one will want to see those deals close more than the business owner, and no one has more experience. No one has a high chance of closing deals. And that has become a strict criteria for us now. Probably, as like, let's say we take on a really big business and they've got sales savages and they have a consistent history of closing deals, no problem. But for the most part, that's now become a criteria. And I know this won't be a churn issue in the future. So, we've fixed so many churn issues. I really don't have many more that really do pop up. Most recently, our problem has been scalability. So, I'm understanding that, when you work with building companies, you offer renovations. We had one of our builders do a 1.7 million revenue in 6 months, and he recently closed a massive, massive deal. And, I have moments with them where I'm like, so what's going to happen now? And he's like, dude, I'm getting a bit busy. I don't know. This is pretty hard to keep up with. And I'm like, oh man, that sucks, right? Churning because you weren't producing results, and now you're churning because you are producing results. So we'll find a solution for that. Eventually, it'll probably be, we'll change the type of clients that we take on to be larger businesses that have the capacity to take on X amount of work. Whatever it is, every time we lose a client, there is a lesson that is learnt, and there is an adjustment that is made. And if you do that time and time again, you will reduce churn. And I've seen this happen both for myself as an agency owner, for other agency owners, coaching businesses. I've used this example before, but someone I did business consulting with, he had a tutoring center, 150 odd students coming in doing group classes inside the center. End of the 3-4 months working together, he's at 340 revenue of upwards from 35 to 80 grand a month. And one of the biggest paradigm shifts that he had was he came to me and he was so emotional because of his churn issues. And I just said to him, dude, start looking at it like a, by the way, I've gone in the habit of saying, dude, I don't know why. I think it's because I'm watching too much Alex Hormozy. Anyways, so I said to him, just look at it unemotionally, look at it objectively. Like look at your churn and look at it objectively. You will guarantee lose this many students a month. This is what you need to do to counteract that. And you just need to make sure you reduce it, write all the reasons why people are leaving, put certain procedures in place. And that's exactly what he did. He wrote all the reasons people were leaving. He started making adjustments, and then the reasons started diminishing until his churn completely reduced down. And he started putting certain procedures in place. One thing he did, which is a bit of a good recommendation, is he created exit interviews, which is very popular in the gym niche, but he created exit interviews, and that actually helped him reduce churn significantly. Like at least finding out why people really left, and having the opportunity to save them from canceling is a big deal. So hopefully that there changes your perspective a little bit on churn. Okay, so we've accepted churn; it's an inevitability. We actually look at it as a way to iterate and improve our product, not as a negative thing. Accept the fact, by the way, that especially if you're just starting out, your early days in your niche, that your churn rate is going to be really high. You know, it could be 30, 40, 50%, depending on, you know, how quickly you scale and the promises you make. You may have really high churn. Just accept that. Accept that as a matter of fact. It will be really high, but eventually you will reduce it down. And the goal is to get to that sub 10% range. And then the ultimate goal would be at that 5 to 6%. Those, if I know an agency is absolutely incredible at what they do, if they're at that, you know, 5 to 8% in churn rate. So now that we've discussed churn, let's actually start to dive in and play around with this little tool over here. Okay. So with this tool, essentially what we can do is we can change the things that are in blue. Okay. And then you can actually start to see and project the revenue of your business as the months go on, depending on what happens. So let's play out a scenario, give you an example. Let's say you charge $2,500 a month as your retainer for your services. Okay. And you currently have 5 clients. So if you're, depending on the month, you just come over here and put your current amount of clients. So let's say you have currently 5 clients. Great. Well, 5 clients, this over here just is going to automatically calculate. Your revenue should be around 12 and a half grand a month. Perfect. Now, let's say your churn is at 20% and you're going to factor in 20% churn for the next 12 months. This will tell you how many clients you'll lose per month on average. And then over here is the number of new clients that you did add or planning on adding. Okay, so this is a great way to keep track of this. And this is where you start to actually counteract things a little bit. So let's go back, right? We've got 5 active clients at the moment. You're at 12 and a half grand a month and your churn rate's 20%. So you're going to lose one of those 5 clients. But in that month, you add 3 new clients. So you start the second month at 7 clients. Now you're at 17 and a half grand. You churn 20%. So you lose more than one. It's 1.4. You add 3 clients again. Now you're at 9 clients. Then at 9 clients, you get to 21 and a half $1,000. You're at 20% churn. You lose 2 clients this time. You've added 3. So you still actually grow. Now, the interesting thing here is any adjustment on either the retainer value, if we change this to 3,000, look at where you'd be in April, from 24,000 to 29,000. So if we change the retainer value, it increases the revenue. If we changed our churn to 15%, look at where you'd be by December. So you're at 35 grand here. Over time, you'd be at 43,000, so $7,000 more, 20% more just by reducing your churn by 5%. Now, if we reduce churn down to 10%, this is where things get crazy. You're at 55 grand rather than 35,000, right? Now, let's say your churn's at 20%. You're like, look, I want to be conservative and my retainer is 2.5, but my goal is to get to 50 grand a month in the next 12 months. And you're at 12.5 now. Well, then what you need to do is you need to increase the amount of new clients that you're signing on. So if we go 5 clients, let's play around with this. There we go. So roughly 4 or 5 clients a month should do that for you. Yeah, I'd say five clients a month. And what would happen is every single month you would grow, you would lose clients, but you're gaining more clients, and then you'll reach December at that 58 grand mark, right? So this sheet here, I'll sit down and go, okay, well, what if I increase my prices to 3.5 grand? Where would I be? I'd be at 81,000. Holy shit, man, just $1,000 more. Could I sell my services for $1,000 more a month? If I did that, I'd increase my revenue from 58 to 81,000 without changing anything, just by keeping the same amount of clients I'm bringing on, just by maintaining my churn at 20%, which is pretty high. So then I'll go, okay, well, depending on your business, like you might be at 3 grand a month, which is a pretty healthy retainer. And then you may be actually gaining 5 new clients a month, but your churn is at 20%, right? So then you go, okay, when you're taking a look at this, you go, all right, well, what is realistically the biggest needle mover here? Should I just increase my prices by $500? Because if I do that, then I get to 81,000 from 69 to 81,000. Or would it be easier to reduce my churn and cut my churn in half over the next 12 months while I'm at 107,000, right? So that is obviously probably the asymmetric play here, right? Or you go to yourself, oh, I can try to double the amount of clients that I bring on from, maybe, or not, I can try and bring on 8 clients instead of 5, right? And then boom, you're at that $100,000 mark. So when I'm looking at like growing, I'm always like, okay, what is really the tweak here that makes sense? Should I increase my prices because maybe my churn is pretty solid as it is, and I'm adding on as many new clients as I need to, or should I try to increase the amount of new clients that I bring on because my churn and my prices are fine, or should I just work on all three and just choose one at a time, right? Regardless of what you do, there are three main things that you can play around with to project where you could end up by a particular month. The first is the price of your retainer. The second is your churn rate. And third is the number of new clients that you bring on board. So if we were to play out a realistic scenario, let's say you're at 2.5 grand a month retainer, you're at 12 grand, 25 grand. You're at 12.5 grand. You want to get to 50K. I'd probably say to you, look, realistically, let's say you're just starting. Let's put your churn at like a conservative 25%. Cool. And then you want to get to 50 grand a month. Let's do 5 and see how that works. I'd say this would be pretty reasonable. I'd say to you, go, here's all you need to do. Number one, start charging 2.5 grand if you're not. Number two, keep your retention at 75% or above. So in other words, keep your churn below 25%. And then number three, do everything in your power to sign on at least 5 new clients a month. 2.5 grand a month, sub 25% churn, 5 new clients a month. That's all you need to do. And you will go from 12.5 grand to 50K a month in the next 12 months. Okay. This is a way to project, to play around with the churn, play around with the client, and things become very, very clear. So then let's say, hypothetically speaking, you are now here in January, you've added 5 new clients. And in February, instead of bringing on 5 clients, you only bring on 3, right? So now you're at 1,875. So you're like, oh, like I'm below what my projected was. That's fine. That's fine. Now, let's say, for example, your churn was actually at 30%. Well, you can now start to update it live. So let's say in March, you bring your churn down to only 15%, and you signed on 8 new clients. Well, now your projections all start to get updated. So you can come around and actually play with this and update it in real time too. Now, if you want access to this, okay, this sheet, there's only one way to get access to this, and that is going to my Instagram and sending me a DM. And the DM has to be Churn Tracker, okay? Churn Tracker. I want you to work for this. I'm going to give it to you for free. You could probably put this together yourself, to be honest, but just find me on Instagram, send me the DM, Churn Tracker, and I'll flick you over access to this sheet, and you can start playing around with it, okay? I hope this video has helped you out. I know that for me, when I started to understand churn and change my perspective on it and work to improve it, it really, really helped me take my business to the next level. And I hope it does the same for you. I'll see you guys in the next one.